The grand jury was August 24th. Fred Davids heaved a tremulous sigh when he shared with them that the prosecutor was Helen Bingle. Helen was a fearsome litigator with political ambitions. African American, widowed in her 20s by gang violence no less, and gunning for a judicial appointment at a federal level. She promised the public a vigorous prosecution of Detroit's most notorious criminal, even if his notoriety had faded long ago in the eyes of most Michiganders. It barely mattered that many newsreaders were questioning the validity of the federal case, that editorial boards were filling by the week, condemning the cash-strapped Detroit justice system for targeting an old man who has long repented of his real crimes, or that suddenly Michael Ashram became a cult hero. A local rap trio even released a song, Tops of the Pops, about him. All the backlash only served to further rev the engines of Helen Bingle, Donald A. Waltham, and their entire lineup of special investigators and federal administrators. Michael Poppy Ashner was indicted on all but 2 of the charges brought against him. Twice weekly, Fred came over to discuss the case. Once he brought an investigator from Maryland who specialized in sniffing out Ponzi schemes. There were developments in the search for Milt and Anita as well. Apparently they paid cash for a 3-month cruise down the South American coast immediately before disappearing. Anita bought that trip through Livernois Travel. After the cruise, they spent a few weeks in Ecuador, and then they went off radar for 6 months. Reports came in that they were spotted in Istanbul and later in the coastal resort town of Nahariya, Israel. Their son-in-law was brought in 3 times to local police in South Carolina to be questioned. He admitted that they received 4 letters from the Greenbergs addressed to the grandkids, and that each held a few $100s in cash. Those letters were mailed from Mexico City, Nahariya, and from Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. The 4th letter was believed to have originated in Italy, but was the only envelope not found at the residence to verify. The son-in-law remembered that it arrived around last Hanukkah. Despite the investigation and her own inner conviction that her grandfather was innocent of these charges, Lena was still worried as hell. Worried because she could see how badly Poppy's spirits were declining. Troubled because her sister still would not communicate with any of them. Eva even sent Tasha packing, and nobody knew who was watching the baby. Abraham was still in communication with Eva and with Poppy, but he wasn't talking. The morning the trial began in late September, Lena woke early and dressed in soft colors as the legal team requested of her. She wore a cream-colored button-up top with lace around the collar and pressed mauve slacks. She threaded her husband's wedding band on a chain, displayed outside her blouse for the jurors to see. She helped Poppy select a gray suit that morning that had been well fitted 3 years before, along with a light blue shirt and tie. He looked dapper, but Lena noticed a mist of light sweat on his brow during the car ride to the federal courthouse. She reached over to dab it away and kiss him in the same spot. Carmen sat in the rear seat during the drive, her lips tense and pursed together. Fred Davids personally warned her to say and do nothing. They arrived at the courthouse early and settled in. As the seats began to fill and officials and press started to arrive, another person came to show their support for Poppy. She bounded up the aisles, familiarly, a tan woman with row after row of gold bangles up her arms. Held back several aisles behind the defense table, the woman started waving and calling out to Poppy, "Yoo-hoo!" He gave a little wave in return and a smile. Lena leaned forward from her seat behind his table. "Who is that?" she inquired. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. Poppy shrugged his shoulders to his ears, then slowly brought them down. "She gives me my massages." The woman could have been anywhere from 40 to 70 years of age. She found a seat next to reporters from the local NBC affiliate. "She looks like more than a massage therapist," Lena snorted, and retreated back to her seat. She settled in, hugging her elbows and keeping a guarded eye on Carmen to her right. Poppy sat calmly, with Beatrice's handkerchief tucked into his front pocket. He could almost smell her perfume on it this morning. When he thought of his late wife, it was always of their happiest days, when he could still joke with her, or she would smile, as a young newlywed. He pictured her laughing when Saul was playing in their backyard, climbing trees, or the girls began to come around. The trip to Niagara on their 20th anniversary. He knew what he faced this morning was very serious, but all he could focus on were his memories of Beatrice. When the proceedings began, Prosecutor Bingle stood. Her hair was cut into a sleek page boy. She wore gold button earrings and a tailored brown suit. She stood, turned toward the jury, and smiled. She looked calm, she looked very determined, and did not look at her defendant. We are here today to present the matter of the United States Treasury and the State of Michigan v. Michael Ashner and Ashner Financial Trust. We intend to lay out the deceptive investment practices that Mr. Ashner employed with his former financial advisor. While Mr. Greenberg isn't present today, we believe he has gone into hiding for fear for his life. Mr. Ashner is not new to illegal activity here in the state of Michigan, nor is this the first instance he has coerced a financial ring to help build an illegal empire. We intend to present direct and first-hand evidence of his financial manipulation of the federal tax code and of innocent investors who were drawn into his schemes. It was only when the judge responded to Prosecutor Bingle that Lena noticed something. He looked bored. He kept his hand over one brow, and she could swear that he sighed several times, although there was so much rustling of paper at the table to her left that she couldn't be certain. She actually started to relax, just a little. She watched as her grandfather sat, completely still and completely silent, unmoved by the prosecutors as they began to lay out the case. Most surprising, however, was news that apparently the star witness would be none other than Antonin Rushmore. Lena noticed her grandfather's head tilt slightly forward when that announcement was made. The proceedings began at 10:15 a.m., and an hour and a half later the judge released everyone for lunch. I call this session to recess for 2 hours. We will resume at 1:45 p.m. You may be excused. He stood, turned, and departed for the door to his chambers, his robes swishing. Helen Bingle and the prosecuting team gathered up their documents, their papers, their files. They looked serious and stern. Comparatively, the defense team seemed light-hearted and jocular. This was intentional at Fred David's orders. He wanted his client relaxed and comfortable. The defense waited at their table for several moments while most of the room emptied. Fred rose from his seat and suggested to Poppy, "Let's get you something to eat." Poppy, Lena, and Carmen stood in unison. As they departed the courtroom, out to the vestibule, and onto the front steps, they found themselves faced with the crowd. Journalists and curious onlookers were gathered. Someone applauded. Poppy walked slowly, with Lena at his left elbow. As they meandered to the parking lot, headed for Fred's black sports utility vehicle, they saw the camera crews lined up along the curb. The defense team quickly clustered around the defendant, blocking him as much as possible from view. Poppy kept his head down and seemed to walk slower and slower with each step as everyone else jockeyed around him. They moved toward the parking lot, trying hard to stay out of view. They were about 20 paces from their cluster of cars. The attorney, Lena's Volvo, a few other cars for the defense team. When Poppy suddenly stopped and shuffled forward, his hands reaching out, he mumbled something and fell to his knees. He clutched his chest, and Lena curled over him, her arms around her grandfather. Carmen screamed and fanned her hands in the air. The attorney's assistant quickly flipped open his cell phone to call 911.